They set dance floors on fire with Love Roller Coaster and Fire, and shocked the world with album covers so bold they sparked rumors, legends, and even scandals. But behind the glitter, funk, and fame, the story of the Ohio Players is far more heartbreaking than most fans ever knew. From the highs of 17 top 40 hits to the devastating losses that tore through the group, their journey is one of triumph, tragedy, and unforgettable music. Some members found new life in solo careers, while others faced battles with illness, decline, and untimely death. So what really happened to the Ohio Players after their golden era of the 1970s? Who is still with us today, and who left this world far too soon? Stay tuned, because the sad life and end of the Ohio Players is a story that's beyond heartbreaking. The Ohio Players weren't just a band. They became mentors, paving the way for countless other artists and helping turn Dayton, Ohio, into one of the country's true music capitals. Their story began in the early 1960s, when a group of young, hungry musicians came together under the name the Ohio Untouchables. Led by Georgia-born blues guitarist Robert Ward, the lineup included bassist Marshall Rock Jones, saxophonist Clarence Satchel, and trumpeter Pee Wee Middlebrooks. Together they were raw, soulful, and full of fire. Fans who grew up in Dayton still remember the thrill of seeing them live. "My dad used to take us to the clubs where the Untouchables were playing," one fan recalled. "Man, that stuff was off the chain. Their music had so much energy. People would drive in from all over just to hear them. We wanted to be like them, but we had to work on our skills to even come close." The group quickly built a reputation, recording tracks and even backing up big names like Wilson Pickett. But problems soon surfaced. Robert Ward's unpredictable behavior, sometimes even walking off stage mid-show, created chaos. After a heated clash between Ward and Marshall Jones, the band finally broke apart. The remaining members, determined never to play second fiddle again, rebuilt from the ground up. They recruited a gifted young guitarist, Leroy Sugarfoot Bonner, whose arrival transformed the group. Bonner's story was remarkable. The eldest of 14 children, he had never attended high school but taught himself guitar. His passion for blues and jazz gave the band a fresh sound, while his stage presence added a new spark. With their new leader, the group began blending R&B with a bold, high-energy style. They practiced relentlessly, performing wherever they could. Music wasn't just their work. It was their lifeblood. By 1967, they had a new sound and a new identity. The Ohio Players were born. Smooth, stylish, and brimming with charisma, they embodied exactly what their name suggested, and fans everywhere couldn't get enough. By 1968, the Ohio Players had landed a deal with Capitol Records and released their first major album, Observations in Time. For a young band out of Dayton, Ohio, it felt like a breakthrough. They weren't just making music. They were mentoring younger acts and building a scene that would soon make Dayton famous as one of the funkiest cities in America. But success didn't come overnight. The album failed to make a big splash, and Capitol quickly dropped them. The early years were marked by frustration and struggle. Still, the band refused to quit. Everything changed in the 1970s. In 1970, they brought in a teenage musical prodigy named Juni Morrison. Brilliant and innovative, Juni pushed the group headfirst into the rising wave of funk, a genre that was about to dominate the airwaves. With him behind the keys, their music became sharper, harder, and full of an irresistible energy. The transformation paid off. In 1971, the Ohio Players signed with Westbound Records, the same label working with George Clinton's Parliament Funkadelic. That same year they released Pain, a single that altered the course of their career. The track was pure emotion, driven by blaring horns and raw, soulful vocals. When Leroy Sugarfoot Bonner sang Pain is in My Heart, it hit listeners like a punch. The single broke into the top 40, marking their first real taste of national success. But it wasn't just the sound that turned heads. The cover of Pain became iconic in its own right. Instead of the usual safe or glamorous image, it featured model Pat Evans, her head shaved bald, her presence bold and unapologetic. At a time when such an image was nearly unheard of, Evans wasn't portrayed as a passive beauty. She radiated strength, independence, and defiance. "They didn't even tell me what I was going to do," Evans later recalled. "They just handed me this tiny bikini and I thought, oh my God, I'm in trouble." But the risk paid off. The daring cover sparked conversation everywhere, and the record sold in droves. By 1972, the Ohio Players were no longer just a local name. They were becoming a national force. Riding the success of Pain, they followed it up with Pleasure and Ecstasy, albums that delivered more of the gritty funk people couldn't get enough of. The covers were just as bold and unforgettable as the music inside, sparking conversation everywhere. But with rising fame came inevitable challenges. In 1974, original drummer Greg Webster was forced to step away due to health problems. His replacement was James "Diamond" Williams, a powerhouse behind the kit whose falsetto vocals added a whole new dimension to the band's sound. Not long after, another major change rocked the group. Their creative spark and frontman, Junie Morrison, left to pursue a solo career. It was a tough loss, but the Ohio Players quickly found their answer in a young, gifted keyboardist named Billy Beck. Beck fit in seamlessly. He understood the band's style, injected new energy, and helped elevate their music to the next level. With him in the mix, the Ohio Players hit their peak. Over the next few years, they scored 17 top 40 hits, cementing themselves as one of the most successful funk bands of the decade. "It was very important that we were able to play the kind of music I wanted, R&B with a little flair," one member explained, summing up their unique blend of style and soul. The lineup was solidified with Billy Beck, Diamond Williams, Leroy "Sugarfoot" Bonner, Marshall "Rock" Jones, Ralph "Pee Wee" Middlebrooks, and Marvin Pierce. Yet at the heart of it all was Clarence "Sat" Satchel. Satchel wasn't just another player, he was the glue. He designed the costumes, choreographed the stage moves, kept the band organized, and made sure everything ran smoothly. More than a leader, he was the quiet backbone, respected for his humility and his unwavering commitment to the group. While others shined in the spotlight, Sat was the one holding the Ohio Players together. Sadly, even at the height of their fame, the Ohio Players' story was shadowed by struggle and heartbreak. Success brought money, recognition, and hits. But it also came with tension, personal battles, and painful losses that eventually chipped away at the group's unity. Arguments, changes in the lineup, and behind-the-scenes drama marked the beginning of their decline. Yet in 1975, the band unleashed one of their most iconic songs, "Love Roller Coaster." The track captured everything the Ohio Players did best: funky grooves, playful lyrics, and a sense of fun that was impossible to ignore. To this day, it remains one of their most famous and enduring records. The band's creative process was as unconventional as their sound. Leroy "Sugarfoot" Bonner had a gift for bold, spontaneous lyricism. "Everything I said started rhyming," he admitted, "and sometimes it made me feel a little crazy." His words were often so raw and daring that they had to be toned down before making it to radio. Meanwhile, Clarence Satchel had a unique habit of tossing out random words like fire, roller coaster, or honey, and challenging the band to build entire songs around them. Their philosophy was simple: the best art comes from simplicity. That's exactly how Love Roller Coaster was born. On the surface, it was about life's wild ride, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. But the band added a cheeky, romantic twist that made the song both relatable and irresistibly funky. The catchy hook and infectious beat turned it into an instant classic. But what truly pushed Love Roller Coaster into legend wasn't just the music. It was the infamous rumor that surrounded it. Fans swore they could hear a woman's blood-curdling scream buried in the track. Whispers spread that a murder had been captured on tape. One chilling version claimed the scream came from Esther Corday, the Playboy model who graced the cover of their Honey album. According to the tale, she allegedly got into a violent fight outside the studio, and her scream somehow found its way into the recording. Over the years, the rumors around Love Roller Coaster only grew stranger. One version claimed that a studio worker murdered Esther Corday and secretly slipped her scream into the recording. Another said she wasn't killed at all, but died in a roller coaster accident, the sound of her final scream somehow finding its way onto the track. But the stories didn't stop there. Some insisted Esther had been badly burned during the Honey album photo shoot, when the honey poured on her body supposedly melted into her skin under the hot studio lights. According to the tale, she stormed into the recording booth afterward and screamed into the microphone in anger. Even in this version, she survived, but the legend stuck. Then came the spookiest twist. The scream wasn't human at all. Fans whispered that the studio was haunted by the ghost of a murdered prostitute, and her wail had been captured forever in the song. Convinced they'd uncovered proof of something sinister, listeners played the record again and again, searching for evidence. The Ohio players, meanwhile, couldn't help but laugh. Leroy Sugarfoot Bonner even joked, "If it were true, I'd be in jail by now." The reality was far simpler. The scream was nothing more than a band member imitating the sound of someone on a roller coaster. It was just a playful studio effect, but the rumor helped push sales through the roof. And the band never rushed to shut it down. The mystery made the song unforgettable. The same boldness that fueled their music also defined their album covers. The most famous of all was Honey, featuring Esther Corday covered in golden honey. At the shoot, she posed on a sheet of plexiglass while real honey was poured over her. Under the blazing studio lights, the honey hardened, gluing her to the surface. It took hours and buckets of warm water to free her, but the striking image was worth it. That cover, along with the wild stories surrounding it, became part of the Ohio players' legend. Honey sold over 1 million copies, earned them their second platinum album, and kept them headlining massive venues like Madison Square Garden and the Superdome. For a time, the Ohio players weren't just Dayton's pride. They were one of the hottest funk bands in America, with a legacy that was as provocative as it was groundbreaking. The Ohio players weren't just a funk band, they were Dayton's pride. In a city far from the glamour of New York or Los Angeles, the group gave locals a sense of cultural power. Their success made Ohioans feel seen, and their music became an anthem for the state. Their rise was meteoric, and for a time they seemed unstoppable. Funky rhythms, provocative visuals, and sheer energy turned them into legends. By the early 70s, their calendar was packed. They were performing nearly 200 shows a year. Audiences couldn't get enough, and the band fed off that energy. When it was time to do the gig, you had to be up, you had to have energy, one member explained. But behind the curtain, cracks were forming. Life on the road came with two dangerous companions, exhaustion and drugs. At first, everything looked fine. The money was flowing, the shows were packed, and success felt endless. But slowly, rehearsals were skipped, discipline slipped, and priorities shifted. When the tours ended, the truth became undeniable. Everyone in the group had turned to the same drug, cocaine. What began as a quick fix, a way to stay awake, to keep the high-octane performances going, soon spiraled out of control. The drug that kept them moving also started to pull them apart. Even worse, some record executives fueled the problem. They pushed the band to record during the day and play shows at night with no regard for their health. All they cared about was profit. Keyboardist Billy Beck would later reflect, "That's when I realized we were going to have problems." As cocaine began creeping deeper into their lives, the Ohio players' discipline started to crumble. The fame was intoxicating, the lifestyle lavish, but underneath the glitz, chaos lurked. Billy Beck realized just how bad things had gotten when he saw fellow bandmates like Satch and Sugarfoot tangled up in situations that drew the attention of the police. One moment in particular stood out. Marvin Pierce, one of the players, pulled up and casually said something that left everyone stunned. "Satch, your cocaine is on it." It was a jarring reminder of the drug-fueled troubles that were simmering behind the music. Yet, despite the turbulence, the band pressed forward. They continued to tour, and their albums, Angel and Contradiction, both climbed into the top 10. Fans were still hooked on their sound, dancing to hits like Body Vibes and Hoiku. The story behind Hoiku was a classic Ohio Players moment. The original recording stretched nearly half an hour, but they cut it down to its most electrifying parts. When it came time to name it, Satch simply tossed out Hoiku, and that became its title. The group wasn't chasing radio hits. They were just making music they loved. But success couldn't shield them from what was coming. Marshall Rock Jones, the band's treasurer, soon received a chilling call from an IRS investigator. "You can avoid me, but you can't evade me." It turned out someone within the band had been writing unauthorized checks and hiding income. Lavish spending on penthouses, limousines, and luxuries they didn't need had left them vulnerable. When Marshall confronted Satch about it, he was furious. "Why didn't you tell me, man?" Satch tried to calm him down, even offering to pay off his house. But the damage was done. Because Marshall had filed a joint tax return, the IRS went after him too, threatening to seize his home, car, and everything else he owned. Clarence "Satch" Satchel may have been the band's leader, the man who choreographed their moves, designed their costumes, and kept their paychecks coming, but not everyone saw him as a savior. One night, Marshall "Rock" Jones made a call that would change everything. He rang Satch's wife and revealed the unthinkable. The rest of the band was planning to push Clarence "Satch" Satchel out of the Ohio Players. This wasn't just a clash of egos or a temporary fight. They wanted him gone for good. And soon enough, Satch was fired. But removing him didn't solve their problems. If anything, it exposed bigger ones. The group was suddenly drowning in financial chaos. The IRS came after them hard for years of unpaid taxes. The shock came when they learned that Mercury Records, their label, had never deducted taxes from their royalty checks. Every band member was personally responsible for money they hadn't reported, and the debt was devastating. The fallout destroyed lives. Satch lost it all: his house, his cars, his savings. Everything he and his wife had worked for vanished in front of them. Years later, he admitted, "We never got over that." The pain of losing everything in an instant was something he carried to his final days. And Satch wasn't the only one. Other members of the band also faced the wrath of the IRS, each struggling under the weight of financial ruin. It was a cruel twist for a group that had once been at the top of the charts, proving that fame didn't always protect you from betrayal or mismanagement. The tragedies didn't stop at money. The Ohio Players also endured deep personal loss. Leroy "Sugarfoot" Bonner, often called the heartbeat of the band, was more than just a frontman. With his raspy, one-of-a-kind voice and electrifying guitar riffs, he had a way of making audiences feel the funk down to their bones. Fans adored his energy, his charisma, and his ability to pour his soul into every performance. As Sugarfoot once said, "This is my life, this is like my breath," and for decades, he lived by that. But in 2013, at the age of 69, he lost his battle with cancer. His passing was a crushing blow, not only to the band, but to generations of fans who had grown up with Fire and Love Roller Coaster. To them, it felt like losing an old friend. Through it all, Clarence "Satch" Satchel remained remembered as one of the Ohio Players' original architects. A gifted multi-instrumentalist, best known for his soulful saxophone, Satch helped craft the songs that defined the band's legacy. In 1995, tragedy struck when Clarence "Satch" Satchel died suddenly at just 55 years old from a brain aneurysm. His passing was a devastating blow, not only to the band, but to the sound that defined them. Clarence had been a creative force. And with him gone, the Ohio players lost an irreplaceable piece of their identity. 2 years later, the band faced another heartbreak. Ralph P. Middlebrooks, their powerful trumpeter whose sharp notes gave the Ohio players' music its bold punch, passed away in 1997 after a battle with cancer. He was 58. For a group already struggling to stay in the spotlight, losing Ralph so soon after Clarence made their climb even harder. Another name forever tied to the Ohio players' golden years was Walter "Junie" Morrison. A musical genius on keyboards, and as an arranger, Junie's experimental ideas helped shape early albums like Ecstasy. Though he left the group before their peak, his fingerprints were all over the sound that would later carry them to stardom. In 2017, Junie died at the age of 62, and fans across the world mourned the loss of one of funk's most innovative minds. The losses continued. Greg Webster, the band's original drummer, was the heartbeat of their earliest days. As a founding member, he laid the foundation of rhythm that gave the players their drive. Greg passed away in 2022 at the age of 84, one of the last surviving members of the original lineup. His death marked the closing of a chapter, a reminder that the golden era of Dayton funk was slipping further into memory. Other early contributors also left their mark. Guitarist Robert Ward passed in 2008, and drummer Cornelius Johnson followed in 2009. Both had helped shape the raw energy of the Ohio players' early sound, ensuring the group's music would stand the test of time. One by one, these musicians departed long before their legacy ever faded. But with each loss, it felt as though another piece of the Ohio players' soul was gone. Surviving members have often spoken about the difficulty of keeping their history alive, especially when the music industry and fans seem to move on so quickly. Despite inspiring countless artists and shaping the sound of funk and R&B, the Ohio players have sometimes been overlooked in the story of American music. Yet their music still speaks. Tracks like Fire, Skin Tight, and Love Roller Coaster continue to make people dance, sing, and feel good decades later. For fans and future generations, the best way to honor Clarence, Ralph, Junie, Greg, and all the others is simple. Keep playing the music, because as long as the songs live, so do the Ohio players. Remembering the legacy of the Ohio players. The story of the Ohio players is not only about funk grooves, gold records, and unforgettable stage shows. It is also about the men who built the sound and carried it into history. Their music, full of fire and soul, remains alive today, even as many of its creators have passed on. To remember the legacy of the band is to remember the lives of its members. Robert Ward was the spark that started it all. Born in 1938, Ward founded the Ohio Untouchables, the group that would eventually evolve into the Ohio Players. His guitar, drenched in vibrato from his magnetone amplifier, gave the early band its distinctive edge. Though he left in 1965 and faded from the scene for a time, Ward returned in the 1990s with a renewed spirit, recording albums that proved his fire had never gone out. Sadly, two strokes in his later years silenced his music, and he passed away in 2008 at the age of 70. Marshall "Rock" Jones, born in 1941, carried the bass that anchored the Ohio players' greatest hits. Known for his turban and stage presence, Rock Jones stayed with the group through their most successful years, from Fire to Love Roller Coaster. He was the last surviving member of the original Ohio Untouchables lineup, a living link to the band's roots. He fought his final battle with cancer, passing in 2016 at the age of 75. Leroy Sugarfoot Bonner was the voice and face of the players. Born in 1943, he ran away from home at just 14 and found himself in Dayton, where destiny placed him among the men who would change funk forever. Sugarfoot's charisma and vocals powered the Ohio players to their peak in the 1970s, and even when he went solo in the 1980s, his name carried weight. He died in 2013, taken by cancer at the age of 69, leaving behind a voice that still echoes through speakers today. Walter "Junie" Morrison, the youngest of the group, joined in the 1970s and quickly became a key creative force. A prodigy on multiple instruments, he shaped the players' sound before moving on to Parliament Funkadelic, where his genius only expanded. From London to America, Morrison's fingerprints can be found across decades of funk and R&B. He died in 2017 at just 62, far too soon for a mind that gave so much. And then there is Dutch Robinson, one of the Ohio Players' early lead singers. Unlike many of his bandmates, Dutch is still with us today, carrying the flame into the 21st century. His career after leaving the Players has been wide-ranging, from producing hits to performing with Cirque du Soleil, even singing at the 2010 Winter Olympics. His 2013 album Freedom stands as proof that his artistry has never stopped growing. The Ohio Players' story is one of triumph, reinvention, and resilience. Each member, whether still here or gone, left a piece of themselves in the music. Their grooves, their voices, their energy, they live on every time Fire or Love roller coaster makes someone move. To remember the Players is to honor more than a band. It is to honor a brotherhood of musicians who turned funk into a force of nature and whose legacy will keep burning as long as music is played.